Let's go. Hi all, again. It's us again, and this time we're talking about how you write a series. And I'm Nina, and why don't we we'll have a round of presentation.
I will start because my name begins with A.
Yeah.
My name is Andy Peliquin. I'm the author of the 6-book Last View Solari series. The first book has been published since 2015, and the second book is launching in August. And I intend to publish 6 books, 4 more over the next 3 or 4 years. So it's going to be a long one.
Hi, I'm Debbie. This is the first of my series, Pause. I happen to have it out here. The Pause series currently has the first 2 is out, plus I have a series of tales connected with it out. It also will be a long series. I don't know exactly how many. This is part of the thing at the moment. It'll probably end up being somewhere between 5 and 8 books by the time it's done. The third book will be out later this year. The fourth book should be out in the middle of next year. And then we keep going. The way I write means that it's a surprise to me too. I know where the whole series is going, but not quite how we're going to get there yet.
Okay, and my name is Sarah Berman. I am having the first book of the Runespell series published. It's coming out in September. Too weird. I'm deep in the throes of Fluffy Bunny, the second book. And I have currently a rough outline for the entire 9-book series.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I just have to say, any book titled Fluffy Bunny is absolutely worth reading. Very Monty Python-esque.
Definitely.
Yep.
Oh, no, that was the white bunny.
True.
Right.
The Vorpal Bunny. Vorpal.
Fire running me. So, first question then. First I have to say, I've never written a series. I'm working on my first long book, and I've written 2 children's books that have the same characters. So I guess, in a way, it's a series. But, first question, how do you start off writing a series? And is it necessary to know that you are writing a series when you write the first book?
Ladies?
I don't think it is necessary to know. I think a lot of times just working out the details of plots, you get to a point where you realize this is never going to be a single book. That would be a major, major book and a major, major writing experience. So, it just kind of gets to the point where this idea is too big for a single book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. When I started writing Pause, I had the idea for Pause. It came to me kind of in a flash. I'm not really a plotter. I'm more of a pantser. So I got the story down. And then, as I was writing, I said, "Wow, this is huge." My book is about an international organization of shapeshifters that spans, and I have characters that span through centuries. I have immortal beings that were born, centuries ago, and I have, organization. Even though my first book takes place in the St. Louis Pause, I have organizations all around the world. So this has to be more than just one book, and I felt that fairly early on. But as I said, I still, even now, writing the second, third book, I'm still kind of a pantser, even though that's changed a little. And I still don't know quite how long and how far it's going to take to reach the end of my story.
I think a lot of books start out as a series, but the series gets bigger as you go. I mean, when I first started writing the first book of what became the Last View Solari series, it started out initially as a comic book, and it was intended to be 18 to 20 books, issues, sorry. And when I turned it into a novel, I realized that this character's journey completed its arc in the book one, but to actually take the character on a proper journey that led to a satisfying conclusion, it was going to take more than one book. And I had conceived it as a trilogy initially, but considering where the character comes from, he's a half-demon assassin. So it's going to take quite a lot of character development to have that satisfying ending. Mm-hmm. So over the course of the 6 books, each book takes him a little bit closer to his end point, where he's come to terms with himself and his strengths and his weaknesses and all of that, to where you get this satisfying conclusion to this character, where you feel, okay, the character is in a place in his life where happily ever after isn't guaranteed, but at least you can be content that he's going down the correct path for his life and the story has wrapped up. Of course, there's always room for more. There's no end to any story, really. But at least where the readers will be like, okay, I've started this character's journey, I've seen him along all the way to this conclusion, and I'm happy. It gives me that feeling of satisfaction. That's when a series should end.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Nope. So, given what we talked about a bit before we really started the discussion, what can be considered a series? Do all books need to have some of the same characters in them? Or could a series be based around a setting or a problem or anything really?
I think there's 2 distinct kinds of series. I think there are series like Harry Potter or The Lord of the Rings, or my books too, where there's a distinct story running through the whole. Now, each book can have its own, and should have its own story arc, and its own resolution, but eventually we've got an end goal. We've got an end goal here. Then there are series like the Terry Pratchett Disc Club, or the Piers Anthony Santh books, which all set in the same world and don't necessarily have to be read in order, but all build, and you know the characters, and some of the characters come and go and are in the different things, but they're still part of the same overall series, but a little different than the kind of series that has one long story arc.
Yeah. I'd have to say that I agree. There are different types of series. One example of one of those alternative types is the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It's a 10-book series by Steven Erikson. And in the beginning, you're introduced to this amazing set of characters, and you know, oh, I totally want to read more about them. But in the second or third book, you are introduced to a completely new set of characters in a new setting with a new problem. It's set in the same world. You understand that it's going in one direction, or there's some loose connection, but you don't really know. And then as you develop, as the books go on, only by book 7 or 8 do all of these divergent plot threads meet to finish the story. So I think a series can be anything, no matter how closely or loosely associated, provided either it follows a set of characters, a grander set of problems or a story, or the same setting.
I would have to agree with that. You have Piers Anthony's Immortals series, Incarnations of Immortality series, where it follows death, and it follows war, and it follows, all of these characters that are manifestations of immortal concepts. And it's not until you get to the end where you realize that it's all this giant plot that has come together into this final thing. And then, you have the Harry Potter series, which is a really great series about a very specific group of people. And then you have, for example, the Narnia series, where, nobody's going to ever say that they're about the same people. They're about very connected people. A lot of the same characters appear in several books, but you know, you have like The Magician's Nephew, where it's kind of a stretch to even figure out how these people are related to the others. So it, you know, you have these different kinds of series, and so long as it's easy to see that there is a certain amount of cohesiveness, I think you can say that it's a series. It, you know.
And C.S. Lewis, when he wrote Narnia, didn't even consider it a series as such. He wrote them as shorter pieces, well, like single novels.
Yeah.
And he didn't write them in order either. He wrote them in different orders than what they're traditionally seen as being currently.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, what if not knowing that you're starting a series in book one, what is important to think about when you plan the second book in what then essentially becomes a series?
Well, I actually had this. So I wrote the first book as a pantser, and I was happy with that. And I just my story just evolved, but I knew I was going to write second, third, whatever book. So I start to write the second book in the same way, and then realize I can't. That I have all these characters and all these events, and I have to make some kind of order for it. So I had to step back and make myself a big timeline, a huge timeline. I had to go back through the book and find when did this happen, because I don't write in order too, and I write a lot of flashbacks and backs and forwards and things. So I had to make a big timeline to say where everything happened, and I had to make a big character list and actually family tree as well to make sense of all these characters. And now when I write, and I'm now writing book 4 at the moment, now, whenever I get a new character or whenever a new event happens, it gets added to the timeline and the characters, and it all builds together. But funny story, when I started making my new character list after the first book, after my book had been through editors and beta readers and loads of other things, I discovered I actually had 2 characters, both Animagus owls, both called Cedric in the book. And nobody else had noticed. So by not planning, I then decided, well, okay, they have to stay like that now. So now I have Cedric Ainsworth Jr., who's the teacher, and Cedric Aywood Sr., who's the librarian. So you sometimes have to fix little things that you in series to make sure that everything is consistent throughout, and that you things like that.
So you then start a series Bible. You find that being important?
Yes, pretty much. And that's what it is. It's building. And now I've been told by my beta readers who read book 3 that I now need to add some of that information to the end of the book. I've got to the stage where I have enough characters and enough things that there will be like a glossary of characters at the end of the book. I wouldn't have done that in the first book because again, the plot twist thing that we were talking about before, it would spoil some of the things to know, how people were related and stuff at the beginning. But now by book 3, I definitely need that.
I think the original question was, when you start writing a book and you discover as you're completing it that it's a series, how do you proceed? I actually ran into this problem last year when I started writing what was intended to be a standalone book about a young girl who's sold to a thieves guild at the very young age of 8, and her journey to becoming a badass thief. And it was originally conceived as a 1-book series, but then the people who were giving me advice and feedback, they said, well, what about what happens before? How does she become this badass character that we were seeing at the beginning? So that led to the standalone one-off becoming a trilogy, following first her beginning, her life that led up to the initial point that I wanted to start at, then the books that tell the story that I originally wanted to tell, divided into 2. And really, there's no correct way to plan for that happening. But what matters is that you find a way to make the cohesion between the books. Whether it's you write this first book and you say, oh, this could be a great continuing story. Well, then you have to make something to keep the readers interested in what comes next. So you add some plot twist that they're not expecting, or you leave some thread hanging or unresolved that makes them say, oh, I want to find out more about this. Like at the end of my last View Solari series, the first book, he deals with the antagonist of that story, but the antagonist gives him a clue to something that was actually a very important part of the book for him. He has no memories of his past, so the antagonist gives him something that says, well, here's a piece of your past that you didn't actually know. And so at the end of the book, the character, the hunter, he says, well, now I'm going to go find out more. And there's that hook that says, hey, there's another book coming.
So that book you wrote as a second book was a prequel?
I originally conceived it as a standalone book, but then the story that I had initially designed became books 2 and 3, and I wrote the backstory as the book 1 to explain.
Ah, okay.
In Too Weird, I actually I conceived it as an idea based on Odin's runes or Odin's spells, and when I was outlining the plot, I found that I could only really wedge 4 of the runes in there, and there are 18 of them. And I went, well, maybe she'll have to go find the others now.
So, what is important to think about when writing a series? How do you best spread clues and revelations throughout the series? And how do or would you plan a series? I guess since all when you have series, how do you plan them?
Well, I'm a planner. I have a very lovely program it's similar to Scrivener, but I can't use Scrivener, so it's not Scrivener. But it has the same kind of outlining type of stuff involved with it, and I use that a lot. I also use there's a technique called the three act outline. Yeah. There's some very specific formats that I've found really work for helping me get the very basic outline done, and I use that as my base pattern. Essentially, as I'm writing, I always know what direction I'm trying to go in. I always know what major events I need to put in order for the book to work. So when I do a series, I essentially do the same thing with the overall series. I have various plot points that this needs, just a little bit of a hint in the first book, and then you have a couple more hints in the second book, but you're always building up to that same plot arc that you would in a single story, but it has to be overarching, and it has to kind of interweave with the plots that go on in the individual books.
And this is where the series Bible comes in as well.
Yes. I know a lot of writers like to write by the seat of their pants, the pantsers as they call them. Mm-hmm. But in my experience, the pantsers, they often have a hard time keeping the series cohesive. I don't know, Debbie, you as a pantser, have you found that, I have to go back and change this, or this doesn't quite work, but I can't change it because the book's published or anything like that? Has that ever happened to you?
Well, no, not in terms of the plot at all, actually. I did republish Pause, but that's because I started off being published by a small press, and I reached the end of I reached the end of my contract with them and decided that I'd prefer to go indie. So at that point I got a chance to re-edit, but I didn't really change anything much in the plot. The plot, I'm kind of happy with the plot now. I go over and over and over. I rewrote my first book in several different POVs. It started off first person, ended up third person, because I realized I needed more POVs than I could handle with just the story of Miri. This is a very wide story, much wider than I originally thought it was. originally I thought, oh, it's the story of Miri. This is the young girl. She receives the silver cat charm from her grandmother the night before her grandmother dies. And it passes on a magic she didn't know about. And this is her story. And I've written it through. I know how her story ends. I've even written the epilogue to the whole series. What I'm not clear of is how we get there. And I also, when I started writing, her story is very interrelated with the story with her grandmother's story too. Her grandmother, the charm saved her grandmother's life from the Nazis. We know this from the very beginning of the book, virtually. It's like from the prologue of the first book. But I do a modern day story to start off with, Miri, with the idea, even from the beginning, that I'm going to go back and write the prequel. That's what I thought I was going to do. But actually, that's kind of not what I'm doing. In book 3, yes, we're going back to Celia's story, but it's part of the sequence now, because I realized you couldn't read it first. If you read her story first, it would give away way too much of the plot to have discovered Celia's story first. You need to discover it as Miri discovers it, as she herself discovers it. So, yeah, I'm still a pantser, really, because the big plot points kind of emerge as I'm writing. And I might know where I'm going, and I think it's very important that each book has its own story arc that is completed in each book, even though at the end after the first book could be read alone and people will be fine. But from my second book onwards, you really need to carry on. It does need to be in this order. You can't really read it in a separate order. You pick it up, you pick up book 2 or book 3, you'd be lost. Because you really do need that. And I kind of need that too. I know, as I say, so I have a vague idea where each book is kind of going to go. And I do make notes, and I'll write down odd scenes in notebooks when I'm out places, when I get an idea for a character or place. And, but the way I write, it could be, a lot of things get moved around. A lot of scenes get moved around to what makes the most sense. And sometimes I have to write in, So, yeah.
I think to sum up what she was saying is pantsing does work, but you do need some sort of outline or understanding of what's going on to follow.
Mm-hmm. Something like that.
How long beforehand do you start, Debbie? Considering if you have to rework them and...
I don't put them in. That's one of the nice things of now being indie, is I do not put myself on a schedule. I work till I'm done, till I'm satisfied that I have the best book I could possibly have before I release it. So no. So my first book I wrote as a NaNoWriMo project originally. I had the idea. I wrote things in notebooks the month before, and then got the bulk of my work down, my first draft down during Nano Month in November. But then it took months and months of going through it and editing and working and then going to beta readers or whatever till I got it to the point that I was satisfied with it. And I am now, and each book is that way. And so I'm getting, that's, I'm a strong believer in that. If you haven't got an external deadline, don't make yourself your own deadline and therefore release a book that isn't your best. It needs to be your best. Okay.
Good to know. Yes, let's see. Name some series that you like, that you think of being successful, or that you think of being successful. Why do you like them, or why do you think they've become successful? You can do both if you have the time, I think.
I know that for me, when I find a character or characters or setting or story that I like, it's so addicting. One of my favorite book series of all time is the Rhaenyra series by Michael J. Sullivan. And from the very beginning, you meet this grumpy assassin and this way too upbeat swordsman, and just something about their relationship. They're best friends and they hate each other, and they have this wicked rapport, super sarcastic. Everything about the book is just so much fun. And when you get to the end of the story, it's the story arc for that book closes, but there's no way you want it to end after that. You know, a good book, you have to have more. It's like a drug. They say books are like drugs, and I totally agree. And that's why series are so awesome, because you've got 3, 5, 6, sometimes 10 to 15 books to explore these characters. Like the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett. You don't care about the characters, but you totally want to find what ridiculous thing Terry Pratchett will come up with next to make you laugh. And that, for me, you know, those are still some of my most enjoyable reads, those 30-plus books by Terry Pratchett. Even if I don't care about Rincewind, the Idiot Magician, or the City Guard, or anything like that, just seeing what ridiculous stuff he could do next was totally what made it worth it.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree with you about Pratchett. I'm a big Pratchett fan. I'm also a huge Harry Potter fan. I'm major Potterhead. I like all the little details and all the little stuff and all the little funny bits and all the little, you know, whatever. And that's it. And as you say, a good series is completely immersing. I also, at this point, rather than talk about all these nice series that everybody knows about, I want to talk about a few series that are written by indies that I know that are amazing and that everybody should know about. One of them is a series by a wonderful young author called M.A. Ray, who writes in a world called Menural. It's about these who are foul-mouthed. This is not for kids. This is for adults who don't mind a bit of colourful language in their fantasy. Start with the first book, Hard Luck, and then work your way through. She's writing them slow. You get to the point when you read a book and you get to the end of it and you're desperate. You wanted to write more and you want to find the next one. That's when you know you've got something there. You've got characters you really care about. You want to see what happens next. So that's one of them, I'm going to say. Completely different. If you like your series dark, but still funny, I suggest you pick up Misha Burnett's Book of Lost Doors. He's finished it now, which shows you something here. You start with Cat Skinner's book, his first one. You meet his very warped characters. That are, you know, his main character here has a kind of a serial killer inside his head and has to live with that on a day-to-day basis. He creates so much world and something. Now, here's about the series. When Misha started writing this series, and he's a personal friend of mine, actually, started writing this series, he thought he had many more in him. But last year, when he completed book 4, he suddenly realized, you know what? I think it's done. You sometimes reach a point and you decide, yeah, I might have had some other ideas, but sometimes you have to leave the character. Sometimes you have to let other people maybe decide what happened next. And it works. Each of the 4 books in the series come together. And yeah, I was upset at the beginning. I was like, no, you've got to write more. You've got to write more. And a lot of people said, I said, no, actually, after you start thinking about it, we've got there. We've done there. This is how it is. And so, you know, that suggests there are so many cool indies out there, as well as all the other stuff.
It's always important to leave room for fan fiction, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely.
And Kalisara?
Okay, I am a huge fan of the Wheel of Time series, and primarily because the overarching plot is just so brilliantly intricate. I every time I reread the books, it's like, my goodness, someday I will be that awesome, or die trying. But also the world building. And I really think that if I had to pick a single thing that nails me every time as a reader, it's the world building. I also enjoy the Dresden Files series, a very similar series called the Rowan Gant Investigations, and then a little interesting series that I picked up by way of an anthology is the Study series by Maria Snyder. And it's actually, there's 2 series in that. And essentially one series is about one character, and then another series is about another aspect of the entire world with another set of characters. But it's still connected, and it's just brilliantly done. But all of them have this beautifully intricate world. There's no questions about, well, maybe how does that work, kind of thing. No, it's intricate, it's detailed, it's creative, it's an interesting twist. The Poison Study actually has a transgender twist. I mean, totally blew me away. It was awesome, and all of it is about the world building. The characters are great, the plots are great, but the worlds are so rich.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that was really a good element of the Wheel of Time, one of the things that made it so successful, is from the beginning you knew that there had to be a final battle. And so what everyone kept reading was to find out how.
Mm-hmm.
How they got to that final battle, and of course how the battle turned out. But that from the very beginning of the series, you knew, okay, at the end of this series, no matter how long it takes, I'm going to find out how the Dark One is defeated. And that right there, that hook, is what made it so successful. And of course the characters and the world building and the politics and the magic, everything.
Oh, yeah.
That hook, it made you keep reading because you'd already committed to finding out the beginning of the story, so now you had to find out the end.
Mm.
Yeah, and for me, a book that, or series-ish, that is actually not science fiction nor fantasy, which feels like blasphemy, but anyway, it's a series of books by Kane Payton, the Pennington series. And it's quite short. There's 2 books about Pennington. And then she did this thing where she connected it with another series that she has, which the first time I read it, it was really, really cool. I thought, so that's one of my favorite series, just because of that coolness of connecting 2 series, which I think is brilliant. Yeah. So we now have 4 minutes, and I have pretty much run out of questions. So how about we say our final goodbyes? And yeah, you can tell us a bit about your books, perhaps. Could you tell us a bit about your books that you've written? That would be great.
Okay. Well, here it is again, the first book. First book of my series, Pause. This is the new cover, because some people might have seen the old one, created by the wonderfully talented Rachel Boswick. Shout out to her too. It's about Pause is the partnership of animagi, werewolves, and shapeshifters. It's a secret society around the world of shapeshifters with headquarters here in St. Louis underneath the Jewel Box in Forest Park. It follows the story of Miri, as I said, a young girl who gets a silver chat charm and doesn't know that it gives her magic. And in the process, of course, there's an extremely evil werewolf we're going to meet along the way called Alistair. And one of the things I like to do when I'm not writing my series is I like to write short stories. And it's turned out that pretty much every short story I've ever written is also somehow tied to this world, even if I didn't write it that way. So, Alistair has his own story that was originally published in another anthology that's now out individually, as does my evil fairy from book 2, Argentum. She has her own story she's a tag and she's green. And my werecat Littlebone, who also appeared in a horror anthology, is also going to be in book 3 of the series. So everything I write, whether I think or not at the time, is interconnected.
Excellent.
So that's me. So check out Paws.
Yes, Andy.
Well, my 6-book series follows the journey of the Hunter, a half-demon assassin who has risen to legendary status in his city, where he takes all the best contracts and he kills kings and nobles and all the impossible jobs. And in the first book, he discovers some pretty harsh truths about his ancestry, the fact that he is half demon, and what that means to both him and the world at large. He is the last Bucellari, which is the name of his half-demon species. So he is the only one who really knows the truth about the demons and who can fight them. So the whole 6-book Odyssey is essentially his journey of self-discovery, with plenty of blood and violence and death and murder and mayhem and fun. But it's truly a character story driven by this person's, the voices in his head, the things he has to do, the things he's unable to prevent himself from doing. It's very much a dark, twisted, very psychological story. Very, in my opinion, of course, unbiased, fascinating.
Excellent. Kalisara?
Well, like I said, Too Weird will be coming out in September, so probably about a month or two before this video gets posted. But you can follow me on my blog, authorgoddess.blogspot.com, in order to keep up with my other books. I do a lot of short stories and anthologies, etc. And pretty much Google my name, you can find me. I'm easy.
Sounds good. So, on that note, should we say goodbye?
Sounds good.
Yeah. See ya another
Thanks
time.
for having us.
Another space. Bye.